Our sponsor today is GLSA. For those non-members who may be dropping in on the call today, GLSA, or Group Legal Services Association, is an affiliate of the American Bar Association, a professional membership representing the legal services plan industry and provider attorneys. And joining GLSA is just a good way for solos and small firms to increase their business. Check us out at glsaonline.org. Okay, my name is Tom Martin. I'll be your host today. Our teleconference today is Thoughts on the Practical Use of Technology by Lawyers with Dennis Kennedy. I'm very excited to introduce you to him. Dennis Kennedy is an information technology lawyer and legal technology author based in St. Louis, Missouri. Earlier in his career, Dennis wrote a monthly technology column for the ABA Journal. He co-hosts a legal technology podcast called the Kennedy Mile Report on the Legal Talk Network, and has co-authored some books. LinkedIn in 1 hour for lawyers with Allison Shields, Facebook in 1 hour for lawyers with Allison, and the Lawyer's Guide to Collaboration Tools and Technologies, Smart Ways to Work Together with Tom Mile. His blog, DennisKennedy.com, is a highly regarded and respected resource on legal technology topics. Wow, Dennis, you're a very busy man, and that was quite a mouthful for me. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Oh, this is great. It's great meeting you in person a couple times this year, Tom, and especially at the Legal Hackers event in Vancouver that I was lucky enough to attend, and we had a great time there, and I had a lot of fun talking with you. So I'm looking forward to this.
Great. That's very gracious of you. We were really happy to have you at the Vancouver Legal Hackers event. It was kind of an open mic where people got to talk about different legal technology issues. And if you have a local Legal Hackers chapter, I recommend checking it out because there's lots of interesting topics that people talk about. First, Dennis, I'd like to learn more about you. I know that sometimes in these kinds of things we go headlong into the topic of the day, which we'll get to. But I'm kind of interested in learning how you came to this. Can you tell us a little bit about where you grew up?
Yeah, so I literally grew up in a small town in Indiana of 5,000 people, three stoplights, and first in my family to go to college. Definitely the first to go to law school. I went to law school at Georgetown. Ended up in St. Louis, where I had friends. Met my wife here. Had our daughter here, and I've been practicing law for 35 years. I started out in estate planning and tax with a medium-sized firm in St. Louis, medium to large-ish. I guess we had about 50 lawyers at the time in the 80s and
Mm-hmm.
90s, and then and I started writing about technology. So I'd always been involved in technology. So 1995, I always like to tell this story. I got invited to the Windows 95 rollout event in St. Louis, and I went there, and I just it was like an epiphany for me. I got lost driving back home because I was just thinking about it, and I decided at the time. So this is like September 1995, that the internet was the most important thing that was happening in my lifetime, and I had literally missed the whole thing. It was over, and I had missed it, and so I went, and I think it was like the next day or two, I put up a website, which was actually on America Online at the time, and so as it turned out, I was one of the first group of lawyers with the website in 1995,
Wow.
and I got involved in a lot of things grew out of that, and I got the chance to write a legal tech column for Lawyers Weekly USA because I was speaking um, on technology and had done an article or two, and it was like a friend of a friend thing, and so that was a great exposure for me, and I used that to say I really do want to align my interest in technology and the internet, especially with the work that I'm doing. And I saw the world of estate planning and tax law changing a lot. Didn't change as fast as I thought it would, but it definitely has changed over the years. And so I switched my practice into technology law and was able to go to a very large firm, Thompson Coburn in St. Louis, where I got the chance to learn from some great lawyers and with some really great clients. Then I went on my own for a while. And then ended up, I was doing work for MasterCard, which has a big facility here outside of St. Louis. In the last 10 years or so, I was at MasterCard doing information technology law, and most recently with our digital payments and labs group, where I covered what we were doing in research and development, innovation, and all the newest technologies, and got the chance to do some financial inclusion work with our lab in Africa. And at the end of last year, I had the chance to take an early retirement package, and I did. So we're going to be moving from St. Louis, where I've been for 35 years, to Ann Arbor, Michigan, and I'm going to take a little time off and figure out exactly what I'm going to do next. But I think you'll see more writing, more speaking, and some other things from me. And I'm looking forward to kind of shifting direction a little bit.
Well, that sounds really exciting. I'm glad to catch you at this moment, because there's so many possibilities ahead of you. Like, I would think that one in particular is the ability to throw yourself into all of these interests that you've had. That I know when you have a regular job as well, it time-wise to balance everything, but now you'll have more time to engage.
Yeah, I mean, it's there. I read this book, and I wish I knew the author off the top of my head. It's called Portfolio Life, and the idea is you put together a package of things that really interest you, and kind of work in those areas. And a part of that would be something that would be we would call not for profit, pro bono, something like that, which I think will be a piece of what I'm doing. I've been kind of really flattered that people think I should get into mentoring, coaching, teaching, and so I think I'll pursue some of that. But yeah, I just think the idea now, I'm looking forward to doing more writing, having more time to do things. And when you work for organizations for a long time, there's whether it's your employer or things I've done with the ABA or other, when you're part of any organization, you feel like you can't always just say exactly what's on your mind. You got to edit a little bit, but so I'm looking forward to expressing more opinions than I have been able to do in the last good number of years.
I think that a distinction that you have amongst the speakers that I've had the good fortune to talk to is that you have been involved in this very early on, and had an opportunity to really form the conversation and lead it in many ways. Now things seem to be very fashionable in terms of legal tech. And just taking that, by the way, how would you define legal tech?
Well, I think it is shifting a little bit, and there might be a couple of definitions. So I always thought in terms of law practice technology. So technology that lawyers use to deliver legal services to make their life easier to do their work. And that to me was always how I think of legal technology. I think what's different now is that legal technology also means delivery of legal services to the end consumers, whether or not those services are technically coming from lawyers personally, or they're coming through some kind of legal service. So I think when I think of legal technology startups, that's what I tend to think more of, that as that consumer based delivery of services through technology. But there also is that sort of, to me, the more traditional legal technology, and that maybe divides into a number of different areas itself, depending on size of firm and where your focus is. So, and I look back and I say, I still can't get over this, but it was 28 years ago I created a document assembly application to wills, trusts, and powers of attorney in the law firm I was at.
Mhm.
And that's still, document assembly is still considered an innovative technology that hasn't been widely adopted. And that's a surprise to me. So I think you run the range from some of those things that are automation to practice management to the really internet focused things, which has always been what has appealed to me. And then, like I said, delivery of services, delivery of content. There's a lot of areas out there, but I would say probably the distinctions, I would say the two key areas are delivery to end consumers, and then the practice assistance tools, which of all different types.
So would you agree, because I know I've seen like a very stark difference here, agree that even within the last 5 years, things have been night and day in terms of the amount of interest and both financially and popularly in legal technology, that it's really changed?
Yeah, I would say the difference there's been ebbs and flows. So sometimes I'll say, yeah, I think there was this much enthusiasm and this much excitement probably in at the 98, 99 in that time frame. I think what's different now
Mm,
is the actual investment. So the venture capital, the money going into legal technology, I think that's sort of the really distinguishing thing. And then also, I think the willingness of law firms and lawyers to look at innovation and maybe some of the newest technologies and some of the more complex technologies, so AI, blockchain, that sort of thing. I think there's a little bit more willingness to do that in the big picture. And then I also think it's partially economics, but I think with the market being the way it is for law students to come out, and you see more people just doing their own practice. And so I think with the cloud services and people focusing on how can I do a lot cheaply and deliver good client services, I think there's a lot of things happening at sort of the lower end of technology. So it's sort of an ongoing story that there's always things happening sort of from the bottom up, and there's really interesting
mhm.
things happening at some of the biggest firms, and sort of you don't quite know what's going on in the middle, even though at the middle you can do some really interesting things. Like when I was at a 50 lawyer firm to do document assembly, that made a big difference in what we're doing. But you see the focus, things happening at both high end and low end, and just a lot of energy around it. So that is different, but there have been ebbs and flows of that. Like I said, it reminds me a lot of you know the late 90s, when it really felt like there were a lot of things happening too, but the technology was way different. One thing that's cool now is that things that seem like you could, like the reasons to do things now and why they will appeal to people are the same as they were in the 90s, but the technology is so different. It's cheaper and it's way more possible. So that's fascinating to me.
And this might be an unfair question for you, because I know I certainly don't have the answer for it, but the overwhelming success of the Global Legal Hackathon, um, that event was on multiple continents, over 10,000 or so participants. What what do you how do you explain that? Like,
Well,
what do you think are the forces behind that?
yeah, I mean, that's an interesting thing. And so I was talking with Darren Nevin, who's going around the world and putting together a documentary video with the people, I think primarily the people who won the different places at the different sites in the global hackathon. And I think a lot of this is timing. I think that I think the global aspect of law has become really interesting. I mean, I focus on this a lot more probably than other people because of my time at MasterCard. But I think in a lot of areas, payments and other things that I've seen, a lot of innovation happens from way out on the edge, and then comes back
Mm,
to the middle. And so you think if you look at Africa, that they didn't have the wired infrastructure that we have in the US. And so the innovation they've done in mobile and things is really amazing. And um, there's cool things happening there that because of those constraints that won't happen in the US for a while. So in some ways it's going to feel like we're behind. So I think there's that. So I think the global nature of it helped. I think that the focus being on access to justice helped. I think that the fact that there is venture capital interest and people see legal tech as a an area where there is interest in investment. I'd heard that 40% of the projects in the Global Legal Hackathon were had some blockchain aspect to it. So I think
Oh,
that is another area because all the interest in blockchain and some of the practical applications that came out of the Global Legal Hackathon are really interesting as first stage projects, especially. So I think it was a combination of those things. And so, not to get like all historical here as like the old guy looking back, but I think that when blogging first really got rolling, so say 2003 to 2005, that if you went to Wikipedia, there was an actual paragraph or two under blogging that referred to lawyers blogging because a number of lawyers, Denise Howell, Ernie the attorney, Marty Schwimmer, uh, I was one of those, Tom Mile. There's a whole bunch of lawyer bloggers that we really took to that, and it actually um, you know, developed a lot of careers for people. So it's partially timing, and then you get the right people. So I think that some of the people involved in the Global Legal Hackathon are, really amazing, really interesting people. And so I just think a lot of things came together, and the idea of a hackathon is kind of hot right now. And
mhm.
um, they just did a great job, social media and otherwise. And I think that to me, it was like the whole access to justice overlay on it really helped as well.
Do you mind if I ask you a little bit about access to justice?
Hmm.
Because
Fire away.
it is kind of amorphous, and what people mean by it. Like, I guess, what do you think of when you think of access to justice and how technology can have a hand in it?
Well, I think of what I think is eliminating. So I think there are two, at least a couple aspects, as you say. I think there's this notion of access to justice, saying let's focus on people who really don't have access to any justice or to the court system in a meaningful way, and let's try to figure out how we can help them. So I think that's one approach. The other thing is to say, hey, look, we have this system in place that's starting to feel really creaky and out of alignment with how people live and work and do things, especially on the internet. And so, you know, I just got, I made a couple of trips to Department of Motor Vehicles lately, and I'm like, why can't I do this online? Why can't I handle this stuff? Why
Right.
can't we do things by video? And some of the blockchain things, you're going like, hey, if all I need is to prove up my identity, uh, shouldn't there be a way to do this on a
Mhm.
blockchain where we can all rely on it? And so I think there's this sort of big thing of like there's this justice that we need to do that we associate with legal services, the legal services group and all of that, and I think that's one thing. And then I think there's that sort of 80% of people who don't use lawyers or can't afford lawyers, and you're looking at the legal system, and saying how can we improve that and people's relationships with that. And I sort of see both of those aspects of things. And so if you get
Mhm.
me at my most radical, I'm saying I would like to see technology take lawyers out of places they don't need to be. And so I think in some cases what you're seeing with legal technology and that access to justice space is saying, okay, why do you need a lawyer to do these things? Why do you need to go to the courthouse? Why do you need to have all these forms? Why does it need to take a couple trips? Why can you only go during your working day? All those sorts of things. And I think it's that kind of stepping back, looking at the system and saying, what are we trying to accomplish here? And have we just let the existing system kind of, because it's there, get in the way of letting people accomplish things that they can do either on their own or in a much simpler and more efficient way?
I completely agree. I think that, there's interesting work being done in British Columbia, where I live, with Shannon Salter and the British Columbia Civil Tribunal, in trying to increase access to justice by making it an easy process. There's, of course, a lot of stuff that Joshua Browder has brought to the forefront. He's a little aggressive in how he frames it, but eliminating unnecessarily complicated processes is one of the things that I see him behind, and then making that available for lawyers more generally. Um,
And then also seeing it
all of
as
those
part of
could be
a,
good things.
yeah, I would say also seeing it as part of an ecosystem. So my daughter is involved in social work, and we went to a legal design event. She did this for my as my birthday present, agreed to go along with me at Michigan State in February. And her comment was, this is really interesting to me because lawyers look at somebody coming in and they focus only on the legal problem. And the legal problem is just one,
Mm.
sometimes small piece of what the big problem is. So my daughter did work in domestic violence. And yeah, you might need a protective order or there might be these other things, but the that's not what people are focused on. They're focused on, okay, so how do I find a place to live? How do I do these things? How do I keep my job? All of that stuff. And you're saying, okay, can we look at um, the access to justice notion as an ecosystem and say, how is law one piece of that, and can we serve the whole person and look at the bigger picture? And that I think is an idea that I know that there are judges I know and others in the legal profession are very interested in.
You're right. There is kind of the justice with a big J writ large, and then there's justice with a little j that's kind of everyday normal stuff that we just need help with, and that's a lot of things that maybe gets overlooked.
Yeah, I've been using this example lately that I have an LLC and I want to change the name of it. And so I've been on
Mhm.
the Missouri, website and trying to figure out like are there forms or what do I need to do? And I know that there is a corporate paralegal somewhere who does like 1,000 of these a year, and it would take him or her 5 minutes. And I've done this research and I'm not sure exactly that know exactly what it is to do. And I go, this is just too hard. All I want to do is change the name of this company. This should not be as big a deal. And then on the flip of that, it's like, even though I know that person exists who can do it for me in 5 minutes, that I would be happy to pay to do that, I don't really have a good way to get to that person, to find that person and get to them. So, I mean, I think all of us, it's like when, as a lawyer, you try to do your own legal work and you go like, whoa, I don't even know how to do this. Like I'm too specialized. It's like, I have, you know, family and friends ask me something about family law, especially, and I go, "Look, I'm a technology lawyer. I really don't have any idea, and it's different in every state." And they're like, "Yeah, you just don't want to help me." And I'm going like, "Yeah, I just don't even know. I just don't
Right.
know anything."
I'm really interested to know what innovations interest you the most right now, based on the practical type of impact they can have in law.
So I am interested. I mean, this is going to be a funny answer because I'm interested in the whole innovation process. So I'm doing this thing. that David Cowan is doing a series of conferences called the Summit on Legal Innovation and Disruption. And I've been to a couple of them, and I have a project that's coming out of that involves lawyers, corporate legal departments, so lawyers, clients, and the a law school and law students. In this case, using Michigan State as an example, because Dan Lina is part of this group, where we said, can we look at a community-based approach to innovation where we use the students for ideas and other things that lawyers always say they don't have time for. So I think that innovation itself is really interesting to me. The specific technologies, I think, I'm fascinated these days by what you can do with the different social media tools, and always have been. There's all these different services, the cloud services, and the practice related things as I kind of rethink what it is that I'm doing. But if you're looking at the technologies that most excite me, it's going to be data analytics, it's going to be AI, and it's definitely going to be blockchain. But I'm sort of a thinker about those things because I don't know it even at this point, especially at this point in my life. I think I can do education on this stuff, but I don't think it makes sense for me to be a programmer and get down into it. But the blockchain
Mhm.
thing for the last number of years, and especially when I couldn't talk about it when I was at Mastercard, I've just been really fascinated by on a number of levels. So AI is longstanding interest of me for me, but the blockchain stuff and just the whole idea of uh, digging into big data sets is fascinating to me. So that's so that those things, and then applying some of those concepts to me personally. So I always say, like, my favorite area that I would love is personal knowledge management. Like, I would love to have AI
Hmm.
that runs over my stuff. I would like to have data analytics to go over all the stuff I have on my computer and point me to things. I would like to, the recommendation engines, all that stuff, make that personal to me. And that's something I know I'm going to play with because as I go forward, I think I'm going to be, kind of fall back into the solo category. So I'm looking at a total rethink of all my technology because I have the luxury of doing that and saying, okay, um, what actually makes sense? Can I do some of the things that I've always talked about? Can I try new things? Can I streamline the programs I use? Can I automate more things? This is the chance to do it. Can I use more services? What am I, it seems like there's a cloud tool for everything these days. And can I be smarter about how I do that and have things work together? So
Right.
that's one thing I'm sort of looking, hardware as well. Can I get by with just an iPad as my main device? So I call that tech zero, where I just want to go back to square one on technology and say, okay, let's see what I really want to use going forward. So it's kind of like, I think that some of my learnings from that could be very interesting and affect the things I write for lawyers, and may be of interest to the solo small firm category because I need to do it for myself.
So it's a good segue, I think, to the book you just recently came out with, right? You came out with a new book on collaboration tools. So that's kind of addressing these practical ways that lawyers can incorporate this stuff into their practice.
Yeah, Tom and I have written together. Tom was one of the first lawyer bloggers, and um, he's a modest guy, but I always call him like a genius of blogging, and which he really hates now because he doesn't write much on his blog anymore, and because our podcast has sort of become our main outlet. But he really understood blogging from the beginning, and then we started to write together, and then we did the first edition of this book in 2008. And I was just talking to somebody, they said, who's on the and we did for ABA, and who's on the publishing board, said, I was ready to vote against this book when you guys came in with the proposal because it didn't make any sense to me. And then he said, Tom explained it, and I kind of got it. And I said, okay. And he goes, and like about a year or two later, I was going like, wait, this stuff is really important. And and so 10 years later, we were looking at it again to kind of update things. And what we see is that even if you're a solo, that almost every day you're interacting with a bunch of different people. And sometimes it's cooperation, sometimes it's competition, but you figure out ways to work together. And so we're on this Uber conference thing, right, Tom, which I've never used before, but it's an important tool that I need to know how to do. And everybody has like different conference tools, and we collaborate on documents. uh,
Right.
we need to learn track changes. We need to just figure out how. And my main thing is like, how do we make it easy for people to work with us? And so the book is a kind of a practical, very practical approach to say, how do you think about these things? What are examples of the main categories to think about? We have checklists, we have other things like that, and then what are some examples of those things? And it was interesting to me, like how sort of how much and how little has changed in 10 years. So, like what we now call the
Mhm.
cloud has become so important and so well understood these days. So we didn't have to explain as much. The What I would say the biggest change for me is mobile smartphones and apps, because that's really changed things. And a lot of collaboration happens through that, and you have to think about your user, the people you're collaborating with. So you'd say, if I know somebody's on a smartphone, then what tool do I use? Those are and then I think the other thing we noticed was there were a couple tools that we thought were prominent back 10 years ago that we decided not to focus on anymore. And so
Mm.
we had a whole chapter on wikis before. And wikis are still a good tool, and Wikipedia is this great example of it. But we swapped out that chapter for something on Slack, which we thought was kind of the hot collaboration tool these days. So
Right.
you see there's some standard tools that a lot of people use: SharePoint, Adobe, Office 365's made a big change in how people collaborate. But a lot of it is just kind of thinking through collaboration. How is it different when I'm collaborating with people who are all on the same side? Because I want to be open. I want to let people edit. I want to, it's a different approach versus to say, now I'm sending something over to the other side, and do I want to lock it down? And how do I want to lock it down? And those sorts of things. So I think what I discovered going through the book for the second edition is how the ideas and the approaches were similar, and they kind of grew to reflect the changes in the tools. But like I said, I think the mobile smartphones and apps is probably the biggest change over the last 10 years.
Hmm. Well, just to be clear for the people calling in, the book we're talking about is The Lawyer's Guide to Collaboration Tools and Technologies: Smart Ways to Work Together. I think it's interesting from what you're saying. Is just there's a lot of wordplay. When things originally come out, new technologies like AI, and then there's a whole discussion about robots taking over, and then blockchain, and then there's a whole discussion about what does that mean, and ICOs, and there's a fear about everything that's going on with that. And these, it just seems that when these things come out, we get caught up in the wording, and over time it just plays out to become old-fashioned, technology that everyone uses. Like mobile, for example, is just old hat now. Like of course everybody uses, their
Right.
mobile phone. It's not like mobile in quotes, or or these other things where it's this kind of new thing you have to kind of like walk around and poke to figure out what it is. Um, so I really agree with you that 10 years from now this stuff is going to be just state of the art
Yeah, yeah, and I think you have
or
to
accepted.
understand. You just have to understand basics and implications. And so I think that for me, people tell them how I'm like good at explaining technology to people, and I always look to say, okay, what's practical? I love this approach that Clayton Christensen, who's known for the book The Innovator's Dilemma, calls jobs to be done theory, which is okay, what are you hiring the technology to do for you? And if you can ask that question and then answer it, you learn a lot more. So when I talk to people about blockchain, you try to explain it and you see their eyes glazing over because you didn't have a great example. And then uh,
Hmm.
some our friends at the Legal Talk Network have this service of process company, and they did a blockchain proof of concept that allows you to say when you do the actual service, you're gathering location information, other things like that. And once then you write that information to a blockchain. And then when there so that's solid, it hasn't been changed. And when it comes to the time you have to actually, if you have to prove that the process was served, then you have sort of this verified, indisputable proof that the service was made. And I was like, oh, that is
Right.
such a great example because it's not the thing. I mean, I have another example of how you can track the coffee bean that you're drinking from the ground all the way to the cup that you're drinking from, and I think that's cool too. But I think the service of process thing, where you say what blockchain does, is a lot about this verification that occurs in a way that everybody can trust, and it's between untrusted parties. And you say, okay, it's encrypted, it can't be changed. And then once I say it's like chain of custody, it's chain of identity, it's provenance, and the chain of title. Then I think once you have a couple of examples, people can say, okay, I get that. And I don't think it's really helpful to say, okay, on blockchain, you can do smart contracts, and that's going to replace all lawyers and all contracts. And you go like,
Right.
no, actually, smart contracts are fascinating, but they're really, I understand them better as intelligent agents. And you say, here, the perfect example to me is you have an escrow account, and you say, uh, once like a time period expires or some other thing happens and it's verified, then the money automatically goes through and you don't have to have the middle party. You go, okay, I get that. And then you can move from that to say, like I was talking to people in the life insurance industry, and I said, wouldn't it be great if you, like when somebody died, like the death certificate was on a blockchain and it was verified. And your insurance, the fact that you owned the insurance policy was verified on blockchain, and that could be used by the insurance company and they would know the beneficiaries, and you wouldn't have to find the policy or death certificates, and the money would just get automatically sent out. And you go, okay, I get that. But if you're saying, oh, it's a smart
Right.
contracts could take away from lawyers, you go like, I do a 150-page M&A contract. There's no way that can be coded. And you go like, yeah, I mean, that, maybe it could sometime in the distant future, but that's not really a great use case at all. But these simple things, and to go back to that access to justice,
Right.
small j, you go, wow, this could be really useful. So like, why do I have to, once I got the driver's license or a passport, why am I proving up identity ever again? No, there should be some way that I can do that. And you go, if the blockchain allows that to be validated, then wouldn't that be great? Because that would make my life easier.
I completely agree. And it's interesting, like you mentioned, a lot of times when these things are talked about, the the most extreme uh, you know case is brought up of something that could possibly happen if there's like 20 different conditions that are met. Extremely rare case, and yeah, that's true. That does require a lawyer to be a lot more thought and to consider all of those different possibilities. But the 99% use case is more simple than that. Um,
When also if technology is used right as a practicing lawyer, it frees up your time to do. I always say that to me, at its best, law is this incredibly creative profession. And if you're like doing the same things over and over again, and you're proofreading and, just this drudgery work, it's not creative. But if you can offload that onto technology, I mean, the same way lawyers learn to offload certain things to paralegals and others, then that frees you up to do the stuff that's really creative, really interesting, where you can really help your clients and society at large. And that's what I think is becomes the cool thing about being a lawyer. That of course, raises
mhm,
the billable hour issue to say like, how do you charge for your creativity? But we can figure that out.
definitely. I did get a couple of questions for you from listeners, so
Okay.
let me jump into those really quickly. The first is from Nick Rishwain, and he wanted to ask you, and you kind of touched on this before, but do you consider social media a component of legal tech?
Yeah, I do because it's the communication piece. So there's a great, and I forget who said this, but it's been said for a long time. But the computers were initially thought of being this computation tool, and what they
Hmm.
really became, what their highest use is a communication tool. And so I think that with social media, you have this communication and people use it in different ways. So because I'm a writer and I've always had columns and things, I look at social media as a publishing channel. Now, my friend Kevin O'Keefe at LexBlog, he grew out of a thing where it was very participatory and you answered questions and there was social engagement. And so we have this conversation a lot because he thinks the best use of social media is through this engagement. And I don't disagree with him, but it's like hard for me. It's kind of, I always felt like being engaged in social media was like inviting people to look at your email inbox and see how far behind you were, because you always feel guilty that you're not responding to people. So I think there's different ways to use it. And I just find it hard these days to say, how are you going to reach people not, um, and be known if you're not using social media tools, the other communication tools, and especially things like LinkedIn. I mean, when I occasionally run to a lawyer and I look them up on LinkedIn and they don't exist, I it just befuddles me, to say like
Hmm.
how can you not do that? Because that's how people are going to find you on the internet. So I think it is a legal tech, and it's one of those things where you'd say if I'm looking as a practicing lawyer and say here are these different buckets of legal tech. I think what makes sense is to go to what you're, kind of gravitationally drawn to, because that's what you tend to do best. But that to me would be one of the aspects. And I would look at it to say, what is the job? Again, what is the job I'm hiring social media to do? So people used to say to me about LinkedIn, I don't get LinkedIn because I'm on it and I'm not getting any clients. And I don't even understand how I would
Right.
get clients. Like, how do I reach out to clients I don't know, potential clients? I go, that's not what LinkedIn is for. You're trying to connect you're trying to build, grow, and nurture a referral network, you know? So, and the same thing with blogging. People say, well, if you were doing estate planning again, what kind of blog would you do? I said, I would do a blog that was directed to financial planners, life insurance people, and accountants, and come up with things that were helpful to them. So they would say, oh, I have a client who needs a lawyer to help with this. Here's this guy who's been really helpful to me and provides this great information.
Mhm.
And if I was reaching out to like everybody who might need a will or something with the blog, that's a really difficult thing. And you're probably not going to get any kind of payoff from that. But if you look at social media to say, does this enhance my referral uh, network? Then it starts to become interesting. Or do you say, if I'm writing these things anyway, can I put these out here? Or I always wanted to experiment with videos, or I did a CLE presentation. Can I put it on the internet? Then social media starts to become uh, really interesting. and uh, in a number of different ways. And what I like as a platform is you can take it in so many different ways. So I have my own way of doing it, but other people have been really successful doing things that don't exactly make sense to me for myself, but I get how that makes sense for them.
One other question we have is from John Waxman, and he said that you had talked about document assembly, doing some yourself in the past with estate planning. Today, do you have any thoughts on products for document assembly today? Is there one that stands out for you?
No, I've looked into that a little bit, and I think that what you find is, so the general feeling is this. So when I did it, I felt like I was hand coding. So there are tools like hot uh, hot docs that will allow you to do a number of things. They can feel complicated, and you might have to have somebody help you. There are also, but people are also creating templates. And so the thing about document assembly that was the epiphany for me was once I stopped worrying about going for the 100% perfect document as a result to saying what I really wanted to do was to get a really good first draft that I could then work from, then document assembly really kind of fell into place for me. So I think if you can start to say, okay, so what kind of makes sense there? What are those tools out there? So there are some things where you can say, well, there's a kind of classic document assembly tool like Hot Docs. There are some other things out there that allow you to kind of assemble clauses using the tools, building off of what's in Microsoft Word. There's some higher end tools. There's some cloud-based tools. I've always liked a company. I don't know their pricing, so this is not not the best on this, but there's a company out of Australia called XRI, EXARI, and I've always liked what they've done in document assembly. So it's a cloud-based tool. So I think there are a number of things
Yeah.
out there and you can kind of explore, but I think if you sort of back away to the 80-20 rule and say like what do I want to accomplish? So when I did a document assembly, um, it took we would fill out a list of what we wanted. It would go down to word processing. We'd come back the next day. You do some other things to cut some other stuff out, go back to word processing again. And then you're kind of ready to roll up your sleeves and work on the customization. And I had the sense that it took like 5 hours of legal time. It just seems crazy to me, but it's like 5 hours of legal time and 2 days to get like a decent first draft done. And so when I worked on the document assembly thing and you answered a set of questions, and in 5 minutes you had that good first draft that you could work from to customize, it was like, this is amazing. And then they said, oh my God, like I still have the same billable hours requirement that I had before. And I just like
Yeah.
killed myself by knocking out 5 hours on everything that I do. But the improvement was great. And your work just changes. So I would say when I so think about document assembly. I think it's another thing where you say you kind of want to step back and say, okay, what's going on? And I would say, where do you have volume? Where do you have repetition? What are some easy things to do that really benefit you? And then start to look into the tools. And so I say something like Hot Docs might be too much, but something that's out there that would help you use sort of like the automation tools within Microsoft Word might do the trick for you. Or there might be like a simple, let's call it non-legal document assembly thing. That's a cloud service that could give you exactly what you want. So I think there's no uh, there's no one answer. It's like when people say, "What's the best technology?" I always say, like, best for what? You got to look at what you're doing.
Yeah.
Like, remember, colleague of mine had, oh my God, just piles and piles of folders on his desk, and this was many years ago. And they asked me like, what was the best scanner uh, for them? And I was like, whichever one will hold the most weight, because you're just going to stack files on top of it and never use it. And so which was really going to be the case. So you kind of have to look at your work process and a number of factors, and then kind of start to explore the tools. But as in the collaboration tools book, we put a lot of emphasis on the free tools and trying new things, because it's pretty difficult to like pick the right thing the first time. And so I think now with the cloud services going really simple at the beginning and seeing if it works for you, and then being able to walk away from it, that notion of fast failing, but kind of walk away from it, try something else, go simple, 80/20 rule. Um, in a way, I started with durable powers of attorney, right? What could be easier? You can change some names. There's going to be a few changes. Once you get that, you build to a more complex thing, and so it's simpler. And then I think the really interesting thing with document assembly now is with these law students coming out, they're all interested in technology, and they get a little bit of legal knowledge from being in law school. And if I were doing document assembly for a firm, I would hire a summer intern out of law school and put them to work on the document assembly project. I think that's a really good meshing of their interest and skill sets, and then you can kind of supervise them, and you probably don't need to get your hands dirty with the coding. But so a number of approaches to go with that.
Well, I think that's fantastic advice. And I want to thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, I mean, it's great. Obviously I love talking about this stuff, and I think for people who want to get, I always keep threatening to blog more, but really to kind of get my current thinking, and especially as I bounce ideas off to Tom Mile, and the Kennedy Mile report on the Legal Talk Network is the way to go. And obviously I'll plug the book, which is, as I understand it now, only available on the ABA's online bookstore. But we liked the book, so we were pleased with how it came out. So that's out there now as well. Just came out a couple weeks ago.
So what's a place on your bucket list that you've never visited but you'd like?
Oh, yeah, we've been thinking about that a lot, because I've been to a lot of places, and we've been looking at things. And I think with my wife and and I was listening to a podcast this morning where they're talking about learning Japanese. I think that going to Japan would probably be on the bucket list for my wife and me. And there's no way that we could keep our daughter from going with us. So that would be like a family trip. So that would be cool. But I'm looking forward to having some time to travel. At MasterCard, I got to travel a little bit, Austria, Singapore, some other places, and I've really enjoyed that. And I enjoyed Vancouver immensely the times I've been there.
I want to thank you again, Dennis, for sharing your time and thoughts today. How can people keep in touch with you?
I'm super easy to find. So being early on the internet, like you can Google me and I generally come up really easily, but it's DennisKennedy.com. I also bought the domain name DennisKennedy.blog, which is what I originally named my blog, as kind of like a little joke that blogs would one day become so important they would have their own domain name. And then that wasn't the case for about 15 years. And then they did. And then I had to spend extra money to make sure that I actually got that domain name. So the joke was kind of on me. And then, like I said, the podcast is on the Legal Talk Network. And then I do a lot of stuff. I'm chair of the board for the ABA's Legal Technology Resource Center. And I like some of the things that we're doing there, that we're starting to build. And that's a great resource for lawyers interested in technology, with a number of things going there, including survey information, and a blog that's really active, that we have postings, I think, just about every day now.
Thank you again, Dennis, for being my guest today. And thank you all who called in for attending our teleconference, Thoughts on the Practical Use of Technology by Lawyers with Dennis Kennedy. Again, this is Tom Martin. Remember, GLSA is just a good way for solos and small firms to increase their business. Check us out at glsaonline.org. Thanks again, Dennis.
Yeah, it was great. It was really fun. And I look forward to talking to you again in the future.
Me too. All right. Take care. Bye.
Bye.